meeting to order while you are down there. Working? All right. Okay, and we can just about begin. Whoops. Good afternoon. I want to call to order the Village Council regular meeting of April 9th, 2024. We'll begin as we traditionally do with an invocation from Pastor Ed Shuck of the Sandhills Alliance Church right here in Pinehurst. Pastor, please join us.
Let's pray together. Father in heaven, we want to thank you for your presence here with us this afternoon. And I want to thank you for Mayor Pasilla and the members of the Village of Pinehurst Council and the commitment, Lord, that they have made to serve the best interests of the residents of this village. I want to thank you, Lord, for each one of them and for the time that they give to serve our community. I pray, Lord, that these leaders might lead with integrity and wisdom. I pray, Lord, that there would be unity of the members of this council. And I pray that they might respect each other and work together for the concerns and needs of the people they serve here in Pinehurst. I also want to thank you, Lord, for all the others that serve this village. We are very blessed, Lord, in the people, whether it's the police, the fire department, and other people who work throughout the village. We thank you for them. And Lord, I would like to ask that you would bless our leaders and all those who serve us, that you bless their work, their families. And I also pray that you would bless the residents of this village and that you would remind all of us that you are present and are here for each and every one of us. I thank you, Lord, for all that you are doing for us, and I pray that you would bless this meeting, guide these leaders today. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm going to ask Oliver Swanson and some of his classmates from the Trinity Christian Fellowship Preschool right down the road here on Magnolia Road. We have Peyton Cooper and Willow Hocker, and we're making a little history. This is the youngest person to deliver the Pledge of Allegiance that we have been able to find at 4 years old, so please rise. Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Well done. Well, you made history, Oliver. Thank you. Let us go on to reports and begin with the village manager. Jeff?
Thank you, Patrick. Just one thing I'd like to comment on for the council and for the public. We're working through the candidate pool for the assistant village manager position. As you recall, I think we had 79 total applicants based on what I reported to you last time. Angie went through that list of applicants and their credentials and their files and has narrowed that down to 18 that she recommended to me earlier today. After reviewing her recommendation, as well as not only those 18 files, but the rest of the candidates that she considered, I think she did a pretty good job of narrowing that down. And it really looks like those 18 folks, at least based on experience and educational background and other qualifying matters, looks like a pretty strong pool of candidates. So I think we're in pretty good shape. I expect that probably by the end of this week, we'll have that list narrowed down to a list of candidates to interview, and hopefully we'll have interviews scheduled with those folks sometime next week. I'm not saying the interviews will take place next week, but we'll be moving forward. And that concludes my report.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me begin with a handful of items that I'd like to mention. This past Saturday, I had the pleasure with my dog Dixie of riding in a horse-drawn carriage at the matinee races and delivering some welcoming remarks. It was a terrific crowd, great weather, and some outstanding members of the audience, including our own Dr. Jeff Morgan. So, but it was really well done, and congratulations to those on the village staff and all that helped work and make that happen. I last week had the pleasure of delivering some welcoming remarks for the North Carolina League of Municipalities, who held a regional dinner here in Pinehurst, at Pinehurst number 9, and Barb Ficklin was also there, and there were about 100 people from various communities around the state, and you know, commissioners, mayors, and so forth. And it was a good engagement. So I got to meet people I obviously hadn't known before, and we all have some similar issues we're dealing with, so it was enjoyable. This past Sunday, I spoke before about 125 residents of the Lake Pinehurst Homeowners Association at the Pinehurst Country Club. They were an engaged group of individuals in their quarterly meeting, and we had a good exchange, and they're an active group at Lake Pinehurst. On two other notes, three other. One, I did attend, and if you read the pilot, you'll note there was an extensive story about the recent Planning and Zoning Board meeting, and it was a good meeting. I want to compliment the Planning and Zoning Board members for their thoroughness and attention to detail, and encourage folks who hadn't either attended or watched it yet to go look it up on our website, so you can see an advisory committee in action, and really in action, because it was about a 3-hour meeting. Next, I just want to remind people the Historic Plaque Committee is accepting nominations. The period for nominations opened on February 15th, and if you want to nominate a home or building, it's no later than April 15th that you can submit a nomination, and you can download the form from the website, but I encourage those of you who are involved and interested in historic preservation in particular to take a look at this program and participate. Finally, this Monday, the Neighborhood Advisory Committee will hold their monthly meeting here at 3 p.m., and there'll be a presentation by Assistant Village Manager Willardson on the U.S. Open and the developments around that regarding the village. So those who are interested, they're welcome to attend. That's all I have. I'll turn to Councilman Taylor.
Just one question on that. Are there any representatives from the USGA presenting to the NAC?
I don't know. I just believe it's Assistant Manager Willardson. That was what was on the agenda.
One thing only, last Wednesday, I registered for and participated in a Zoom call put on by the North Carolina School of Government, the topic of which they have a series of what they call primers, top 10 primers. This happened to be on capital budgeting for local elected officials. And I thought, as a follow-up to the conversation we had at our last work session, that I would just see what they had to say. I thought it was very worthwhile. It's 75 minutes. It's free. They do this periodically, and I would encourage any of my fellow council members to take the 75 minutes if they can. I sent the package out, which they said, and the only page that I wanted to call attention to was item 4 on process. That was a more structured presentation of what I was trying to get at. I'm going to hopefully build on that with respect to some other things in the future. I thought it was a very worthwhile presentation. That's it.
Okay. Councilwoman Ficklin.
Yes, thank you. On the 28th of March, I attended the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. On the 4th, on April 1st, I attended the Beautification Committee meeting. 2 items from there that warrant updates. The Warren H. Manning Award, which recognizes exceptional landscaping in our neighborhoods as well as commercial areas. They will be printing tomorrow, I believe, beginning in the pilot on April 10th. A pilot article about the award. We will have a banner on our website about the award. Flyers will be distributed throughout the village, businesses, garden clubs, and also through social media. Submissions for the award are due by June 10th. Recipients of the award will be notified on June 24th with a gift certificate to a local garden center and a very attractive award for the front yard. Secondly, their second project that they're focusing on is the Dundee Road enhancement. This is done with a partnership between the Beautification Committee and the Pinehurst Garden Club. Primary focus is Pinehurst, the circle in front of Pinehurst Elementary. They're working with the school principal who has provided the committee with donated projects paperwork to get things rolling. Landscaping budget plan will be developed and an implementation plan for the fall. The project will be funded through grants by the Beautification Committee as well as the Pinehurst Garden Club. It's expected to be an educational project involving elementary students. That's it for me. Oh, wait, one other thing.
Go ahead.
I almost forgot. It happened this morning. No wonder I almost forgot. Mayor Pazzella and I went to Laurinburg to visit the Scotland County Library at the recommendation of staff. Very interesting little field trip. So we'll talk about that when we talk about library. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Farrell.
Thank you, Pat. Second on the matinee races, a beautiful day and huge crowds. Really getting to be quite an event. I attended the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting yesterday at the community center. They don't meet that often, but I think they've made excellent progress around the village in pathways and pedestrian pathways. Doug Willerson reviewed the plans and the progress and the funding situation on pathways, focusing on number 6, which is going to get quite a bit of attention, West Mackenzie, which is sort of in process, Fields Road, and Pine Vista. So all either in process, in plan, or being considered seriously. The discussion centered about future walkways on Linden Road out to the lake and options how to do that. That's been an ongoing issue for years. In fact, some years ago, there was an attempt to build sidewalks out that way, and it just ran into significant resistance, I would put it. And so it was put on the shelf for the moment, but that's an area that may need some attention. In addition, the number 6 access possibly to get out to Airport Road was considered. How to do that, that's kind of futures discussion, as well as Route 5, on Route 5 Beulah Hill from 211 to Mackenzie, some pathway so that someone could in fact shop at the Olmsted area and in fact walk back to their house rather than drive. So that's a consideration. There was a discussion, concerns about the trail and street conditions, particularly street conditions where sometimes the accumulation of sand and pine straw, and we live with pine straw every day, as everyone knows, can be an issue for a walker on the road. And I don't know whether the staff is going to take a look at that. There are only selected areas where it's a significant problem. Other than that, it may need at least some more better focus. The challenge was discussed about pedestrian crossings. Not only the observance of the pedestrian crossing by the motoring public, but particularly crossing state roads, how to best execute that, considering NCDOT, the signage and the lights and so forth. That's an ongoing area, I'm sure, particularly with any state road improvements in our area. We ought to, and our desire to increase the pathways, we'll have to take a look at that carefully, and I think that's a focus item for the committee. All in all, I think they've made I'm very pleased that the village has made significant progress in pathways, and you can see it around the village. There's really a lot of pathways been improved and or new ones put in, or other pathways which were there many years ago are being reclaimed, so to speak. So I think that's a good sign. With regards to the bicycle issue, I think the committee decided that even though it's in their name, Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, they are going to look to the SMPO possibly to think about that and/or any interconnect with other villages or towns as far as bicycle goes. So that's kind of off the agenda for now. So it was a good meeting. I think the staff has made significant progress and they appreciate it with regards to pedestrian activity and pathways.
Thank you all for those reports. And now we'll move on to item 4.
I got a couple of announcements I'd like to make, if you don't mind.
No, I thought that you already spoke about the matinee race.
No, you did it for me.
I was
Well,
riding
how about
around in a
if I
carriage.
reiterate that I think the matinee races were wonderful.
I-
And while you were dashing in the carriage with your dog Dixie,
Yes,
there was also some great races that went on.
it was true.
There were about 6 different races that were the harness races on there. But to reiterate kind of the importance of this, it's the end of the training season for these horses, these young horses. And the races that we had, while we certainly get to enjoy that, they're actually qualifying races. They're races that are used that to basically rank order the horses as to where they're going to fall into their competition ranks and things like that. And most of these are up north. And one of the reasons why Pinehurst is sought after as a training ground is that when the horses go up, which they're going up now, and they transition, they don't have as much of a weather change as if you were training down in Florida. So it's more similar to what it is, and it's easier to climatize into that. But we've got a great track here. We provide a great service to these horses, and I personally thought it was wonderful watching that. From a Pinehurst standpoint, having attended these races about 10 plus years ago and doing it on pretty much a yearly basis, there's a progressively growing crowd that's there. And it's truly becoming a yearly event for us here in Pinehurst, and I think it's a wonderful event to continue on. The Central Pines Regional Council will be having a meeting later on this month, and they did not have one last month. I'd also like to highlight that this coming Saturday, there's a black tie event for the first gala event on founding of the Military Missions in Action. If you have a chance to do that, it's a nonprofit organization that does provide services to veterans, a variety of different types of services on there. But they'll have General Garrett, who's a 4-star general who commanded FORSCOM. He'll be the speaker for that. But again, a black tie event starting at 5:30 on Saturday at the Fair Barn. So once again, we get to host another great event for us. Also wanted to just throw out some kudos right now to our staff. There's a lot that's going on that the majority of the public is not seeing. It's in preparation for the Open. Okay, there's stories before that talk about being going on a sports field, and that the game is won before you even step on the field because of the amount of preparation it takes. And us doing well and being able to host the Open and get through this with all the activities that are going on, that will be streamlined through the activities and the efforts done beforehand. And I can assure you that our staff is engaging. I appreciate the meetings they've already had with some of our business owners and the outreach they've had to the public. So keep it up, and look forward to a great event, and thank you for your efforts. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, motion to approve the consent agenda. All the items that we'll about to approve, unless there's an objection, regard the regular meeting minutes of March 26th and the work session minutes of March 26th. And unless requested by a member to not proceed, I'll entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
Move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. And now we go on to item 5, Resolution 24-13, Adoption of Regulatory and Advisory Roadway Signage Policy. Mr. Apke, please lead us.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Be very, very brief with this. Hopefully you remember back on March the 12th at your work session, I presented you with a draft policy. We call it a Regulatory and Advisory Roadway Signage Policy. This was a policy that was put together primarily by Doug Willardson with my assistance, and also some input from Jeff Batten, Alex Cameron, and Chief Glenn Webb. It was in response to a recent uptick in requests we seem to be getting for roadway signs, not street signs, but stop signs, speed limit signs, deer crossing signs, things of that nature. The policy in general says we will keep signs like that to a minimum and only put them up where necessary. That is kind of consistent with direction we've been provided with from previous councils, both for aesthetic reasons and not to diminish the effectiveness of putting up, of having a bunch of signs up. At the time, council supported the policy back in March, and you gave me the direction to bring it back to you for formal adoption. So it was attached to the agenda item. I have not made any changes to the draft policy that was presented since you didn't have any comments specific to that. So with that, I can answer any questions, and if not, I'll seek your adoption of the signage policy.
Any questions from council members? Okay,
I move to approve Resolution 24-13, adopting the regulatory and advisory roadway signage policy.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, item number 6, the consideration of Resolution 24-14, amendment of the Comprehensive Plan Adoption Amendment and Implementation Policy. Mr. Willardson.
Yes, so similar to the last policy, this has been before council previously, and we decided to meet with Jack and Jeff and Alex from the planning department, so we all met together, and this is the draft we came up with. So really, we didn't change the intent or really the structure too much, other than we simplified it. There were a couple of things of note that I want to bring up. Originally, it had a review every 2 years, and it was in the odd number years. We are proposing to change that to 4 years. It has been 4 years since, well, over 4 years since it was adopted, and we just barely reviewed it a couple months ago, and that didn't seem too off, so we thought 4 years could be the mark that we look at every 4 years for sure, but we could also do it sooner if additional items came up or council just directed staff to do that. The other thing that we talked about and that Councilman Farrell brought up was that we have it in the odd number years, and the thought behind that was that gave council members as long as possible to be a part of the council, know what the comp plan was before they went through a process to amend it. It was brought up that that might be a little awkward because as you're reviewing the process and the comp plan, it would also be right before an election, and potentially during an election it would switch. So that is one thing we could amend, but we left it this way, and I think we're comfortable with it if council as a whole is comfortable with it that way. So.
Any question? I'll ask Jack and Dr. Morgan in particular if they have any comments they'd like to make.
I'm comfortable with what the product that came out here, and in reference to what Doug just talked about on the timing of it, it basically just have a little bit of time underneath your belt before we review it as council members. That's all, and I think it's very reasonable, and it gives us enough flexibility to do it earlier if we need to, but at the same respect, it's not too onerous by saying every 4 years. So I think it's very reasonable.
Jack?
I think it covers all the bases, and I think 4 years is a nice midterm, so to speak, gut check, because it's generally 8 to 10 years between general plan development. So.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
First of all, I think the simplification is a good idea, and overall, I like it. I noticed one thing, and maybe this is just for my own education. Do you have go down to the very other direction, sorry. I mean, it's somewhere I think on the first page, it makes a reference to the fact that the comp plan is advisory only, and council can adopt regulations or ordinances that do not comply with that. And I was surprised to see that only because of the amount of attention that is paid when, for example, we're changing zoning. And there's specific reference to the comp plan, and the change of zoning has to be consistent with that. And that language was eliminated from your new recommendation. I don't have a problem with that. I was curious whether that was intentional, or is it even significant?
Can you take us to the language, Doug?
It's not triggering anything, so I'm looking at what John might be referring to. So maybe it's this section. In the event that a proposed amendment to the village's zoning map or Pinehurst Development Ordinance is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, the council should amend the comprehensive plan prior to or concurrent with the approval of any such amendments.
That was
Oh,
part of it,
that's
but I
almost-
think that survived.
Yeah, that's
almost a given, to
Yeah.
tell you the truth. I mean, you're supposed to enact land use decisions based upon the comp plan, and if you're enacting land use decisions that are in contrary to the comp plan, well, then you should be changing the comp plan, or not implementing those land use decisions.
I think it was farther
Further
up. I
up?
thought it was on the first page, but I could be wrong. It was a simple statement that the comp plan is advisory, the bottom above procedures. The adopted comp plan is advisory in nature, which means other development regulations can be adopted and amended that are inconsistent with it. That's obviously been stricken, and was that deliberate? What? I didn't, I thought the comp plan was not exactly advisory.
I think
but-
some of that may have come from 160D at one time.
really, we struck that just to simplify that paragraph. It was
Okay,
no larger
I
intent.
don't want to make a big deal. I think overall the changes you're suggesting make a great deal of sense.
Good observation, though. Thank you.
The whole intent was to simplify and clarify. And by removing that and still having the other one lower on, I think it's pretty clear that we're going to use the document as needs to be used.
I'm wondering if Alex can clarify this.
Council. So I don't think there was anything intentional other than getting rid of a lot of extraneous information in the policy that just wasn't needed. The statement's true, and removing it doesn't do any harm or provide really any added assistance. It's advisory in nature. This is a council policy. The comp plan is a council visionary policy that's enacted. Anytime there's any amendments to either the comp plan or any of the development regulations, then the general statutes are going to require that the Planning and Zoning Board and the Village Council itself ultimately review the comprehensive plan and make some sort of statement regarding its consistency or inconsistency. Comp plan is not, boots on the ground level. So you're not going to get everything right. Things are going to change maybe within that 8 to 10 year shelf life that weren't contemplated.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions? No, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 2414, amending the comprehensive plan adoption, amendment, and implementation policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion adopted. Thank you. Item 7, the strategic FY 2025 Strategic Operating Plan Preview. Jeff, Dana, Matt, whoever, come on up. All those responsible for this, come on up. I'd like to find my item here. There it is.
Okay, so we are at the point where we can give you an update on where we are with the development of the FY25 Strategic Operating Plan, and this all flows from our annual strategic planning process, which is an annual process. Actually, we'll start again for next year in about a month. But this, in large part, flows directly from the decisions that Council made during the strategic planning retreat during December, and those conversations that took place at that time, and also some conversations that have taken place since then. So this is at a really high level. So there's not a lot of detail in this presentation, but it will. What we hope to demonstrate to you and show you are all of the the things, maybe I can go ahead and, here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to talk about the things that we've identified that we can do in order to improve our performance as a village government and ultimately our customer satisfaction. And then what the impact of that is with regard to our financial viability and long-term financial plan. So during the December retreat, based on 4 different lenses that we asked council to look at our strategic environment through, the council selected 3 areas of focus. The first was delivering effective fire and rescue services. The second is ensuring our codes and ordinances protect the character of village neighborhoods. And the third is providing a safe and effective multimodal transportation system. Those 4 different lenses that I referred to are kind of, there's 2 sides to this, right? One is performance gaps. I call it, performance gaps. We can look at it, and we have looked at it through the lens of areas where we're kind of falling short compared to our benchmarks or other communities and that we compare ourselves to and otherwise. And then the second area is under performance gaps is areas where we have a high level of dissatisfaction or a relatively high level of dissatisfaction in our customer surveys and otherwise. And the criteria we use there is 20%. And then we also look at the strategic opportunities and strategic challenges that the council identified during the retreat. And we try to line all that up so that you can look at this strategic environment through all 4 lenses at the same time, and that's what informed your selection of these 3 areas of focus. All right, so the things that we can do. We call those OFIs, Opportunities for Innovation and Improvement. And we tackle our OFIs in one of 3 ways. Evaluations, projects, and initiative action plans. I'll start at the top. A lot of times we identify something that probably needs to be addressed, or we know that it needs to be addressed. We don't really know what the best methodology is to address the problem. And those are the types of situations where we identify the need for an evaluation. And sometimes evaluations are done at a very low level, very informally, and other times it's done more formally. And those more formal ways that we do it, we do, there's kind of a couple of there's the lack of formality, and then there's the kind of the quicker process, which is the PAR, or the ACE, I'm sorry, and then the more formal process, which is the BIRDIE. And so we're going to talk about those BIRDIEs and ACEs in a future slide here. So the opportunities for improvement and innovation that we identified, or that you have identified, where we're pretty certain we need to do it and we kind of know what we want to do, we either identify those as projects or initiative action plans. And initiative action plans are things that are a little bit more complex, probably a little bit higher dollar amount, bigger fiscal impact, multiple departments that are involved, longer lead times, longer timelines associated with them, more steps that have to be tracked. And so that's why we delineate between projects and initiative action plans. All right, so we're going to start at the bottom with initiative action plans. And in this 5-year plan, we have 6 initiative action plans that were identified during the December strategic retreat. And you're going to see over there under the strategic objective column, some of that stuff is highlighted in red, and those are the areas of focus that you identified back in December as well. And then the second column on this chart are the actual initiative action plans that are in this plan. I'll start at the top. The first is design, build, staff, and equip the 3rd Fire Department facility. That used to say a 3rd fire station. There was some conversation in December about trying to figure out what the best kind of bang for the buck is with regard to improving the delivery of our fire department related services in the western part of Pinehurst. And so we modified that language to call attention to a fire department facility rather than a fire station. And the reason is that we might be able to at least we certainly could at least be able to address the EMS side of our fire department response with something a little bit smaller scale than a full-up fire station. So, and there is an evaluation that's tied to this later on that was identified as a need during the December retreat as well. So what you see there in FY '28 is $400,000 for design, and then the build and staffing of that potential third fire department facility would be in the out years, beyond this 5-year plan. The second initiative action plan is to update the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, and you see $0 there because this is a continuing initiative action plan. Money was allocated in previous years and will be rolled forward to FY '25 to complete that work. There may be some implementation costs associated with that in FY '26. We don't really know that yet. That's why you see that $0 amount there as well. The third one, relocation of the public services complex to allow for redevelopment of Village Place. You can see in FY '25, $400,000. We don't really know exactly what piece of ground we might be looking at yet. We have been looking at some alternatives, but that $400,000 is associated with purchase of the land that would be needed to move our public services complex. And then you see the design in FY '26, and then the build in FY '27. $6 million is what we're currently forecasting, and this plan contemplates an even split on that. $3 million would be coming out of fund balance, and $3 million would be coming would be financed. And then you see a revenue inflow in FY '28. That's the anticipated revenue from the sale of the public services footprint right now, that land that's in Village Place. And then you can see the total on the far right. Moving down the chart, developing and implementing a consolidated multimodal transportation plan. Again, you see $0 here, and this is another situation where this is an ongoing IAP. The money was allocated in prior years and will be rolled forward into the FY '25 budget. So the money will ultimately land in FY '25 to do this, but it was previously designated for this year. Now, if you see some zeros across the line there for future years, again, associated with that one, we kind of recognize that once this plan is adopted, there's probably going to be some implementation costs. We don't know what years specifically, and we don't know what the dollar amounts are, but that's just a recognition that there's something in the future that we'll have to be contemplating as we move forward into FY '26 SOP development, and '27 and '28. Then moving down, we got the retrofit of the current athletic fields with synthetic turf. As all of you know, this is a multi-year project. We started with the Cannon Park Field 1. We initially had thought we would do Cannon Park Field 2 in FY '25, and then do the Wicker soccer field in FY '28, and based on the decisions council made back in December, we flip-flopped that, and it has some implications with regards to cost, more front-loaded costs on that because the Wicker Field complex is bigger and more expensive, but otherwise it's what we had previously contemplated. And then you see the negative values there in the chart, and that represents the savings in operational costs in terms of maintenance of those facilities, because maintenance on those artificial turf fields is less costly. And then the final one is the expand and renovate Givens Library and Tufts Archives, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. There's going to be more discussion about it again later on tonight. But there is some modification in this one. The cost here is associated with the 8,400 square foot option that seems to be the preference, or has seemed to be the preference of the council up to this point. But it is spread out a little bit more as we looked at how this might unfold and the realistic timelines for building that project. We recognized that we couldn't get it all done in 1 year, so the costs associated with building the new library are kind of spread across, I think, actually 3 years, and then you got the renovation of the current facility for the improvements of the Tufts Archives in '27. And there's, the other implication of that is, you'll see later on, we recognize that we couldn't really hire all that additional library staff as early as we thought we were going to. It was originally forecasted for 26, that's not on this chart, but you'll see that that's moved to 27 now. And then what you see in 28 and 29 are the additional operating costs, salary, benefits, and otherwise, for this, the new facility, new and updated facilities that we've always been kind of forecasting. And then you can see the total down there at the bottom. Any questions on this before I move forward?
Couple. First, on the PDO, I thought we were going to move forward with looking for a consultant or hiring the firm that will actually draft that. And so this line having zeros, just we don't know what that's going to cost, but we know we're going to spend something there.
As I said before, the cost is from this year. So this year's money is going to be rolled forward to accomplish that task in 25.
That's the study, that's not the actual rewrite. Or
That
that's-
is-
I'm sorry, hiring the firm.
That is the rewrite.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff, if that's,
Any associated updates to the PDO, I'm sorry?
that's rolled forward, is it rolled forward into a specific project fund?
General fund.
But it is,
Yeah. It's in a specific line item in our budget, but it's in the general fund.
okay, so it is still available, so to speak. Is that
That's right.
Is,
And the relocation of the public services complex in FY '28, the $1.2 million negative number, that's a cost savings, that's not revenue from development of Village Place.
It's the anticipated sale of the property.
Okay.
So it's revenue. And we're going to talk about the impact of that on some other information later on as well.
is there a ballpark number on the PDO, that money that we're going to need to roll over?
It's 200,000 that was originally appropriated in FY '22.
So
So
we would-
we've continued to roll that forward
Continually? So,
until
and
we
that's,
get to the point where we issue a purchase order and start the work.
and that's expected to be a one-time cost, more or less. So it would likely be all spent in '25.
Yes.
Plan-wise.
If we can get the actual product done.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
And just one more, maybe unanswerable, I don't know. Have you begun to think about the staff implications of potentially doing the library and or archives at the same time as we're doing the relocation of the maintenance facility? And if you have, do you think that will require any additional staff to manage two very large projects?
We don't typically actually do the management ourselves. For example, when we build the library, the construction management will be handled by our architect firm. And I assume it would be the same. My initial assumption is we would follow the same type of an approach when we do the public services move.
And whatever that cost is built into the cost estimate?
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, so started at the OFI level, now moving from the bottom toward the top of that previous slide. The next categories are projects. We actually have 31 total projects in this plan, the most significant of which are listed on this slide. Some of these are multi-year projects that we have been tracking and conducting for actually several years now, the first two in particular. Pedestrian facilities, total cost, $2.3 million, kind of spread out evenly over 5 years. As we continue to work on the priorities across our neighborhoods associated with what Jack was talking about earlier. And then also so the stormwater improvements associated with implementation of our stormwater master plan and other needs across the village. And that's that methodology that rolls up to a total of $2.3 million over a 5-year plan, 5-year horizon is something we've consistently applied for about 3 years now. We have the potential purchase of a ladder truck in FY '27 listed there, $2.1 million. This came up in conversation at the last council meeting. It's in '27 now because what we're seeing in the market right now is that the lead time associated with building one of these things is pretty long. It's actually pretty close to 3 years right now. And I'm sure that, you know, if we do decide in, you know, in that year or in a future year to purchase a ladder truck, you know, we'll be able to better inform that timing based on what the market conditions are at that time. So, but this is where it's kind of earmarked right now.
The, at the retreat, the number in there was 1.7, so this has gone up 24% since December as far as a estimate. Well, we have to discuss the necessity for that at the appropriate time. I noticed there are, this is a minor thing, sometimes the streetscape says improvements, sometimes it says enhancements. I assume there's no difference, but I would ask that we settle on one word. Okay, so it doesn't beg a question. These are 11 of 31 projects. Is there the list of the other 20 that you can share with council so we can see what else falls into this?
Be happy to. They're smaller dollar up.
I assume
amount
it's a
yeah.
declining value, but it'd be a good idea to get a conception of the projects that'll be going on for this 5-year period. And 3 of the items are FY 29 specific. Could you give what's the execution of plans for the 29 open? What does that involve?
That's really just a carry forward of our, you know, we identified it as that as an opportunity for FY '24 as well. And so we put that as a placeholder for FY '29 to put the same level of emphasis and care and diligence that we put into in the preparations for the '24 open. $150,000 is kind of projected there. So, you know, some of that is, you know, area beautification, downtown improvement, things like that we've done this year in preparation for this open. There's also something that we all need to be aware of in the economic incentive agreement that we signed with the USGA. Part of that deal was that we would waive the rental fees for the harness track and for the fair barn in U.S. Opens past this one. So starting in FY '29, and that there's about an $80,000 revenue flow that we won't be able to take advantage of unless we offset it in some other way.
And
Did you have another question on those 3, Pat?
yeah, those a little more detail on the software replacement plans that are,
Yeah.
since they're coming out downstream so many years, software changes.
So we just implemented, you know, the current version of our planning department's automation system. In FY 19, I think, and we recognize, you know, 10 years down the road, it's going to be a different market, there are different products out there that might have enhanced capabilities, and so we put that placeholder out there at the 10-year mark to evaluate whether or not there's an opportunity to get a better product that does better things for our community.
That's a kind of a placeholder. You certainly haven't identified the software yet.
That's right.
Who knows what
We would have to do an evaluation to select the software. And
yeah. May I ask about the Restore Historic Pathways in the village? I'm obviously interested in that. What does that mean? What are we going to do there? Any idea?
So what we did was, coming out of after having received the National Park Service Integrity and Conditions Study, and looking at their recommendations, we recognized that the lowest hanging fruit, if you will, that we had with regard to their recommendations for our community to strengthen the integrity and conditions of our district was in fact the restoration of sand clay pathways within the district. And so that's specifically tied to that, and the idea was to incrementally place $50,000 into each year's budget to incrementally, take little baby steps across the historic district to improve our standing in that regard. And the first one we did was Fields Road, and there will be other ones as well.
Right.
And that's, I think, greatly informed by the product that you put together, the map that you put together a couple of years ago that tells us what's out there, what could be improved, and what's historically viable.
What's the acronym ERP mean?
Enterprise Resource Plan. I'm going to let Dana talk about this one.
Go ahead.
Yes, that's enterprise resource planning. It's our accounting software.
It's accounting software. Thank you.
We've been using Great Plains since maybe the dawn of time. And it's kind of served us well, but it has real limitations, and in particular, it doesn't accommodate a better collaboration between our finance department on the one hand and our human resources department on the other.
Is that a one-time acquisition cost, or is there is a user a charge or fee every year? How's that working?
So these amounts, Jason Whitaker, our CIO, estimated for us. The assumption is, given the current market, most software that you purchase is now on a subscription basis. So it's likely when we get down the road to that point, that would be the way the arrangement works, which then we have to factor in and consider, is it one of our GASB 96 subscriptions or not? But we decided, instead of leaving them off under the assumption that it's going to be treated as a subscription for accounting purposes, this was a better way to have that placeholder and keep track of these projects and potential investments that may be needed in the future, regardless of what the final accounting treatment may
So
be.
you're saying this is the potential net present value of that stream that you're going to have to pay?
I think it's based on assuming like a 3-year subscription cost. Yeah.
3, okay.
I'd have to confirm that. I can
That's
confirm
fine.
that with Jason, but I believe that's kind of where those estimates were driven from. But we decided to keep it on the list here.
Right. So if we were
regardless of where
looking,
it
if
ends
we were
up in the
looking
budget.
out a few years, would it be $80,000 a year, or would it be much more less for the subscription?
It would be less per year, and then spread over multiple years. Yeah.
And we currently pay for Great Plains, right?
Yes, it's a pretty minimal cost because that's an on-premises software that we don't pay as a subscription. But the planning software currently is a subscription.
I think I counted across this project list and the Birdies and Aces, 5 different software platforms that we're looking at updating. I have absolutely no doubt that if they've been in place for 5 years, there's better available today. But there's no mention here of anything in the short-term rental tracking, identification or tracking, which obviously a few of us have gotten some email and is a hot button for some people. Is there any plan, could that just be below the 50,000 threshold on this list, or is there any plan to be looking at that as well?
I seem to recall we had money for that in this year's budget. We were never able to find a platform that met our needs. Last year, yeah. But we continue to evaluate, and if there's an opportunity, we'll bring it forward.
I have no view. I'm certainly not an expert in that area. People are saying, well, there's this and there's that, and they just expect us to be looking at it, so.
Right. Other questions on this particular page? Projects
Other
page?
than 2029, it's a long way out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a
Tough to forecast.
that's a key observation. Okay, go ahead, then.
And there we go. Okay, so then with regard to evaluations, we have a total of 18 evaluations in this plan. A lot of those are those less formal things that I discussed before. But at the Birdie level, 2 kind of high-level ones. The first is what was brought up in December, which is to reevaluate the building and staffing needs for a 3rd fire department facility. And that would be done in this coming year. And the second is to evaluate and implement document imaging storage. That's actually ongoing right now. We've made a pretty good headway with regard to at least analyzing the options. There's nothing's been selected yet. But the idea is there's going to be a lot of work associated with this, and a fair amount of money as well. So we want to spread it out over a number of years and kind of take it in bite-sized chunks.
So that looks like, I don't know, 5.5 evaluations per year. If you're conducting 18 over the 5-year period, how do you plan that? How does that work? How's that executed?
5.5 evaluations
You
per
got
year.
18 evaluations for a
5 years.
5-year period. And,
So 3.5 per year.
Yes.
yeah, I'm sorry, 3.5, not 5, probably 3, okay.
Yeah, aces are pretty quick. Birdies, you know, a birdie, depending on the complexity, can take us a few months or it could take us a year. So it's not more than we can handle.
Okay.
Like I said, the lower level, less formal evaluations are just looking at data and trying to make an informed decision. So at the ACE level, the first, and this is in FY25, is to, again, evaluate our CAD and RMS software, that's computer-aided dispatching and records management system for our police department. Southern Software is the platform we use now. We can, you know, there's always discussion about existing shortfalls in that platform, whether or not there are better opportunities out there. Historically, you know, when we've looked at this, Southern Software has come back to the table and said, well, we can make the improvements for you, and sometimes they deliver a pretty good product that addresses it, and sometimes they don't. But we're going to evaluate this again in FY25, see if there's a better product that serves the needs of our police department. And then in 26, evaluating the potential automation of our P-card reconciliation process. And I guess I'll kind of combine this with what's shown here for FY27. We built a really strong financial services department many years ago based on a lot of manual labor. That just takes, you know, it's all Excel spreadsheet based stuff, and you put it in one over here, and you know, you can't populate from this spreadsheet to that spreadsheet to that. And what we want to try to do is streamline these processes so there's more automation involved and free up capacity in our financial services staff. And then with regard to the FY27 improvements to the budget development aspects of the annual SOP process, I think it would make us more nimble as well, because it just takes, it's so labor intensive for our financial services staff to build the budget, you know, based on the input for all departments and do all the reconciliation and do all the what-if analysis. If there's a way, if we can find a software platform that allows it, you know, be entered in at the user level, and then, you know, through the process of refinement, just keep repopulating, I think that there might be some real benefit in that. So we're going to evaluate that in FY27.
What are P cards?
Our purchase cards, our credit cards that our staff uses. Sorry. Okay. All right, so moving on to what it looks like in terms of the financial impact over the next 5 years. Talk about the tax rate. So what our plan recommends is a initial reduction in the tax rate, and also at the same time it's a reduction in the tax rate that were projected in tax rates that were projected in last year's SOP. So currently the tax rate is 23 cents. Our recommendation is to drop that a half a penny in 25. Hold it flat in 26, and then go up the 1 cent that's always been tied to the library staffing and operational requirements of the new library in 27. And as I mentioned before, that 1 penny increase for several years now has been projected for FY26, but we now recognize we aren't really going to be in a position to hire that staff until 27. So that's delayed there. And then holding it flat for the rest of the 5-year term. And for comparison purposes, what you can see is how that compares year over year. So going from where we are right now in 24 to 25, it's a drop and a half cent, then it's flat, then it's up 1, as I talked about, and then it's flat again for 28 and 29. And then at the bottom line compares our recommendation in this year's plan, our recommendation for this year's plan, compared to what the council approved as the forecast in the FY24 SOP. And you can see that in FY25, our recommendation is a half a cent lower. In FY26, it's a penny and a half lower. 27, 8, and 9, it's a half a cent low. Well, there was no projection in 29. So 7 and 8, it's again a half a cent lower.
Is Moore County committed to a reevaluation in 28?
We do expect a reevaluation. So this is all bets are off again
Yeah,
in
go back to square
FY
one, right?
'28 when we get the results of that. And they can move in both directions, you know, back in 2000, what was it, 14, 15? Valuations actually went down, and it caused tax rates to go up, and that was a shock for people as well, but.
Leaving aside the issue of timing, if I recall, the increase in FTEs for library staffing was 3.
Total of 4, 1 in 26 and 1 in 27, and 3 in 27.
And 1 penny of tax is round numbers, 600,000 of revenue.
Yep.
So if I do the math right, if the penny increase is to finance 4 FTEs, that's round numbers and all-in cost of 150,000 per FTE.
Plus
That sound
additional
correct?
operating expenses associated with the new building.
So it's more than just the staff, it is also the OpEx.
It was all, I may have overly shorthanded my description earlier, but back when we did the analysis, what, 4 years ago now, three years ago now, we anticipated it was going to take pretty close to an even penny to deal with all of the anticipated increased operating costs associated with taking on this new library. And if I recall correctly, we built that into a plan even before the council entered into the final agreement. And the idea was we wanted to make sure that our public knew that there was going to be a tax burden associated with that deal. Okay. So this is what it looks like in our preliminary 5-year financial forecast, and some of this is information you've already seen. The projected or suggested tax rate is on the top line there, and then again there's a comparison to what was in the FY24 SOP. You can see the total FTEs that are built into this plan by year, and I'll go over that in a little bit more detail in a future slide. But you do see some growth there. And let me jump to my notes here, because all right, so we focus, when we build our five-year plan, we focus very heavily on fund balance and estimated operating margin as indicators of financial strength going forward. And for many years now, we had been building up fund balance in anticipation of these capital requirements. It was a deliberate plan that previous councils developed and kicked off. And we are in those years now where we're going to be whittling that fund balance down to where it historically has been as we deal with some of these anticipated capital expenses. You can see that in FY28, we're right down there, actually 27, we're right down there at 30.3, and then we start to climb again. Now, FY29, beyond FY29, we may have a third fire station construction facility that's out there, and I mean, in future years, you all will have the opportunity, I'm sure, to contemplate, depending on what you decide that facility ought to be, or if you're going to do it, whether it's going to be financed with fund balance or debt service or some combination thereof, but that requirement is out there in the future. Operating margins, as was the case last year, were below our range that we kind of try to stay in FY25, but that was all part of that deliberate effort to get our fund balance up to deal with these capital requirements. And then in 26, 27, 28, and 29, we're right where we want to be. So this looks like a very healthy plan.
I thought our target on operating margins was 89 to 91. Wasn't that the sweet spot that we've always talked about? So what I'm looking at here is we don't hit 80, we're not between 89 and 91 until FY 2029. Now I realize these things change every year based on what we lapse and turnover and all that stuff, but I'm just trying to remember the numbers that I learned of 89 to 91 and 30% on the
7 is essentially 89, so we're there, and then we blip down, and we blip down because we're selling our public services property for $1.2 million. So it's a one-time deal that flips it down. So what you're going to see in the out years is 91 or higher if we project this farther.
What's our projection for '24 right now? Dana?
The operating margin is not on there. $84.
Oh, it's where, close to where we think it, projecting for 2025.
Correct.
Okay, so, I mean, if you had to be below 89 as opposed to above 91, you'd rather be below 89. I understand that. So it's not, this is not a danger zone we're entering here. But it is,
You go below 89 if you're intentionally trying to build your fund balance for something that you want to invest in.
right. Okay.
What would be the explanation for the drop in operating revenues between 25 and 26 of some $160,000?
25 operating revenue, 25, 26. Is that the realization of U.S. Open revenue?
A portion of it, let's see, no, because the US Open drop is,
A little unusual to see our revenue drop.
so the operating revenues from 25 to 26 is about 160,000. or
Right,
170,
167.10,
yeah.
right.
It looks like it's driven by permits and fees.
But we don't have to tie up the meeting
Yeah,
for that. It was just,
it looks like it's a fire district revenue.
You also have a drop in 28 to 29.
Sorry?
But neither one of them. You also have a drop from 28 to 29, but neither one of those are
right, they're
dramatic
pretty far
drops.
out, yeah.
It's,
I think 25 to 26, we have a little more perspective.
As I noted back in December, when I didn't understand these numbers as well as I do now, we're still growing expenditures at almost double the rate of revenues. Revenues are going up 8% a year, 8% in total, I'm sorry, from 25 to 29. Operating expenditures are going up almost 16%. That seems unsustainable, even if you assume that we're going to outperform those estimates, because historically we have.
I think that it's fair to, it depends on what lens you looked at this through, right? So we have intentionally held a tax rate over the last 3 or 4 years that was building fund balance in anticipation of dealing with these capital requirements. At the end of this 5-year horizon, that methodology is gone, right? So we're allowing this to get back to a more natural state. Now, I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to say this. This has got our attention. You look at operating income, right? This is the difference between
Right.
operating revenues and operating expenses.
Goes from $1.8 million to basically zero, $40,000.
Zero. Now, it's not, at the end of the day, that's not zero, because this is before you take into account our budget to actual variance.
A budget what?
Understand? But you say
But-
the budget to actual, the fact that we
But the
tend to
trend is what,
outperform on both sides.
is in line with what you're calling attention to, John. So this is, we've got our eye on this, and we want to make sure that we stay healthy.
Is
Again,
there,
this isn't, this is, there's only one capital expense that's contributing to this, and that's the move of the public services. Because $3 million of that is anticipated to be funded by debt, and debt services and operating expense.
but there's also an offset in terms of the sale of the land itself, which is a one-time
Yeah.
realization, so.
It's masking what's happening in 28, because
Right.
if you
But
remove that, you're looking the same in 28 as we look in 29.
Now, is
I
that,
consider that in kind of the capital budget, not that at the end of the day, we don't bring it all together.
Yeah.
But I'm just, on
there's two sources of income, though, there. There's the sale income, which I think is reflected in the $1.2 million number. And then there is the revenue from those properties going onto our tax rolls.
That's-
I understand, but
Yeah.
but the moment we sell it, we're taxing it.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's in any equation or you got it on a cheat sheet or something, but there's some amount of money
Yeah.
that people are going to have to start paying us on an annual basis, whether they develop immediately or they don't.
All right, but it's $1.2 million. It's like the cost of your home, right? So,
Right.
so what's your tax bill?
Believe me, I know. So, anyway, what I'm saying is that there might be more revenue
Yeah.
that we're not counting. We may want to figure out some sort of minor number, small, lowball number, so that we have an understanding that,
Yeah, I mean,
It's close to the
the
edge.
point's not lost on us. I mean, in the future years, as that property is developed, that's when we're really going to see
right,
the ramp up
depending on how they build, what they build.
in revenue.
Right.
Yeah.
And this, look, this is still a very conservative forecast. We're not operating in a profligate fashion.
Yeah.
But if we were an operating business, we would be saying, maybe we need to think about either raising prices or reducing expenses. The only price we can raise is the tax rate, realistically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And other than the forecast
Likes to
Pat
do
is
that.
suggesting, which if we get a little closer to it,
Yeah.
we may be able to more reasonably do. At the moment, it would be a lot of guesswork.
You got a couple more slides here, don't you?
To your point about this, I mean, it's, either you increase revenues or you decrease expenses. I mean,
That's,
the market we deal in is the market we deal in, and if we want to continue to provide the same level of service to our residents, then all we can do is look for efficiencies, right? Otherwise, we're kind of dealing with the market. Now, when we look at where this is, what's attributing to this, there's the tax rate effect that I was talking about before, and there's also, what's closing that gap is a combination of debt service and additional FTEs that are in this plan. So,
But as a separate issue, not really for discussion tonight, I'm somewhat skeptical of the flat FTEs in the out years.
Mhm.
We've projected what we know, which is for the library. That's an immediate need that we can forecast with some degree of assurance or accuracy. I'm skeptical that there will be no other demand, whether it's to provide better services or to staff an emergency response station, whatever.
me too, I just don't know what they are yet.
But that would imply that expenses may actually grow faster than what we are
They might.
projecting because there will be more FTEs required.
right, but on the other side of that coin, we have a history of combination of turnover and using less FTEs than we budget for every year.
Mhm.
So on.
That's the reason we have this budget to actual variance. And every column in here is corrected back for that budget to actual variance. So it's already compensated for in these numbers. Right?
Okay.
I think that's all on that. Okay. So we've not included this slide in previous iterations of this presentation, but it is included in the annual SOP, and I think it kind of calls attention to some of the points that we were just talking about. This is a direct comparison of operating revenues versus expenditures. And if you compare this to what was in last year's SOP, it looks very similar. What's, I think, different is FY 28 because of the sale of the public services property. So that boosts revenues there, but it looks kind of similar. But this shows, what John was calling attention to, where we have greater anticipated growth in our expenditures than we do in our revenues. And we'll just have to continue to watch that as we move
Two
forward.
bars are converging.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So this is kind of a higher level look at of some of the data that's you already saw in the 5-year projection, but specifically tied to fund balance. You can see beginning fund balance, revenue over or under, and then correct back for a budget to actual variance, and then your actual, the projected actual gain and loss, and then what it looks like in terms of fund balance going forward. And then these numbers at the bottom, again, are the same as what you saw on the previous slide, but it's kind of,
I don't remember the .79 anywhere.
that's FY '24, it wasn't on the previous slide.
No, but when Dana, I thought the answer to my question, then Dana, was yours was 84 for FY '24.
This may have been at the time of adoption.
No, I think that, I'll take a second look at that, but I,
Yeah, I'm just, that number, that's the lowest number I've ever seen. You guys may have seen lower ones, but I.
yeah, the 84 may have been the adopted FY '24 budget, where this is based on the mid-year
Mid-year adjustment.
amendments and estimate through the end of the year.
With a roll forward as part of that, that winds up being added to the requirements for next year, so. Okay, so this is the, we have 3 capital project funds, and I guess I could go back to here. Other financing uses, you can see these outflows associated with money that's going into these 3 capital project funds. So this is, it's a negative impact on our fund balance, but it goes into a capital project fund that's intended to be used for these 3 specific projects. Library expansion, this is a $7.2 million that's contemplated for the 8,400 square foot facility. And you can see how that plays out over a number of years. Initial investment in '25, continued construction in '26, and some final expenses in FY '27. Most of which would be the Tufts Archive renovation, maybe all of it. And then the public services relocation, we talked about this before again, so $480,000 for the site planning in '26, and then $6 million evenly split between general fund allocation and a debt issuance to accommodate that requirement. And then the third, fire facility. This is only design in FY '28. There's another placeholder in there in FY '27 for that ladder truck that may or may not be part of this thing. We've kept it separate because they don't have to be part of this, the same discussion. You could, in the future, decide we need the ladder truck, but accommodate it here at this fire station. It'd still come with the same 9 FTE requirement that adding a third fire station would. So that certainly is a factor considered. But again, this line item only anticipates the $400,000 for design of a third fire facility, which would be built in future years.
Before you go off that, Jeff,
Yep.
so library expansion, 7.2 million. Back on page 6, library and archives was 8.5 million, implying 1.3 million for the renovation. From memory, that was at the low end of the 3 options that were presented. I think in the September meeting of last year, they gave you a high and a low range, and $1.3 million was at the low end. I've been using more $1.8 million as kind of a midpoint of those estimates, which would get you up to 9 million, not 8.5.
The 8.5, Mr. Taylor, it includes the operating impact of over 400,000 in FY '27, '28, and '29.
So by implication, there's nothing for the actual renovation of the archives then?
That's in the 7.2 million budget. That includes
Gotcha.
both the library
Okay.
and the archives.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we talked about this a couple times. Our recommendation is to split the bill associated with moving the public services evenly between general fund and debt. And this kind of shows you what the implications are of that, and it allows you to compare ourselves to our peer group over on the far right-hand side of this, the table that's on this slide. What you can see is outstanding debt balance on the top line, how that compares to our overall property valuation across the village, and then you can compare that to our peer group average. We would never be worse than 5/100ths of a percent. and our peer group is closer to 1/4%. Debt per capita, you can see, it starts out at a high of, in FY '27, $127 per capita, and then as we pay that debt down, the bill gets lower, and our peer group average is 322. And then on the bottom line, debt service per capita, there's a similar trend there, maybe a little more pronounced, high of $17.28 and 29, and peer group average of 177. This is just provided so you have the opportunity to see how we compare to other communities that are out there. 31 peers that this is based on, and about 2/3 of them have some debt balance right now.
Are they all in North Carolina, or are they?
North Carolina.
Can I ask if you could compare us to populations of between 15 and 25,000 rather than 10 to 50,000, which we've got here? I mean, our community's at 18 or 19, and the peer group of someone at 49.9 strikes me as a stretch.
Data availability. That's what we have.
No, I understand. I'm just.
I can take a look at how disaggregated the data is. If it includes the population numbers, then I should be able
Yeah,
to average out that smaller range.
Yeah, I think the League of Municipalities may have that because they've tended to compare us in the 15 to 25,000. Anytime I've talked to them, that's sort of their range where they say we fall. But anyway, thank you.
I would just make one observation relative to the presentation I saw last week, and if you look at the deck I sent around, it's item number 7. They talk about intergenerational equity, this idea that the people who are going to use it should be the people who pay for it.
Yep.
And that's an excuse to use debt almost all the time. We could apply that to the library. I'm not suggesting we do, but clearly the library that we're building today has got a 20 or 30 or 40-year lifespan, and so there are going to be people who are not taxpayers today who benefit from that. Maybe something to consider down the road, not for tonight. So, the library will not necessarily have offsetting revenues the way Village Place we hope will have.
Right.
And that's a difference as well.
Okay. So this is how the projected requirements fall out for our staffing needs. This is a little bit more robust than what we showed in December, and I kind of told you that we anticipated that as we had our conversation with our department heads throughout the budget development process this spring that this list would grow to some degree. First item on there, the public services stormwater technician, was in what we showed you in December, and it was called for in FY '25 as well. The fleet maintenance technician or apprentice, if you will, we have added based on our deliberations throughout the spring, and the idea here is our fleet has been continuing to grow. We only have 2 actual mechanics on the floor. You really have to have 2 due to safety reasons to operate and do anything meaningful in a shop like that, in case somebody gets hurt or gets pinned under a heavy object or something like that. And so if somebody's out, then you're kind of stuck with a lost productivity day. And the other thing we're finding is that this is another one of those trades where it's getting increasingly difficult to find qualified people. Young people just aren't going into this like they used to. And we recognize this as an opportunity to take in somebody that doesn't have the full qualifications yet as a mechanic, but bring them on and start them on small engine repair and things like that, and grow them into a mechanic, while we're also at the same time contemplating the fact that one of our 2 mechanics is probably going to be retiring in a short number of years. And so this gives us a way to make that transition as well. So our recommendation is to add 1 FTE in '25 to the fleet staff. We'll have to make a recommendation to you in June on where that's going to fall on the pay scale. More to follow on that. In '26, we anticipate the ability to hire the first of 4 library and archive staff. And then the remaining 3 wouldn't come until '27. And this is consistent with, other than the timing, this is consistent with what you saw in December as well. Buildings and grounds, what we're finding, there's a couple of things going on here. We're finding that as we're investing in more of these sand clay paths and natural surface walkways across the village, those come with an operating maintenance requirement. You know, you can put down a concrete sidewalk that nobody likes, and it's less costly to maintain it over time. But we've made the decision for aesthetic reasons and to satisfy our, the desires of our taxpayers to use these natural surfaces, but it is coming with a bill, and so that's really the biggest thing there. Of course, the additional library grounds that have been contemplated for many years is also going to create more demand for these folks. So that's why we added the recommended building and grounds specialist. In '26, we think that we're going to have a retirement in our building inspector staffing in the near future, and we think it may happen in '26. We've been projecting this for a couple of years as well, so we'll see what happens. But we also think that we may have the opportunity to hire part-time beyond that timeline and still be able to meet our needs. So we'll see how that goes. Yep. We're currently providing inspection services to other local governments that don't have the staffing, so
Is that a reimbursable expense?
pay for it. And then, the last one's the library staff. So this has grown to some degree, as I mentioned, compared to what we saw in December.
So what does that take us when we complete the library and the archives? What will be our total staffing then? Because you've got 3 new ones in '27. We currently, I thought, have 4
Hard to
or
count because
3.
a bunch of them are part-time.
Yeah, no, I was thinking there's the full-time and then there's the part-time and then there's the volunteers, but I'm trying to nail down that number. So it's 8 or 9 FTEs.
FTEs
So
or
there's-
total people?
Yeah, there's currently 4.5 FTEs,
And then we're going to add
and then adding 4
4 is
additional.
8.5. So you're at 9. Okay, thank you.
There's just, as a matter of fact, the 6.5 is already up, 2.5 from the 4 that was in the December plan. Not saying it's wrong, just our recollection was we were projecting an increase of 4 in December and then flat. We're now spacing the library out for timing reasons, but they're now 6.5, not 4, across all departments.
Oh, right. There were 5, because the stormwater technician was in December numbers as well.
Okay, I thought it was 4, maybe it was 5. It's gone up a little bit, so, okay.
All right, so some questions to contemplate. Have we sufficiently addressed council's higher priorities in the proposed 5-year plan? And if not, if you can give us some guidance, that would be helpful and appreciated. Are there any other council priorities that we need to address? And are there any significant modifications you'd like to make to the proposed 5-year plan at this point, while we still have time to crunch all the numbers? And then you can see the proposed timeline or tentative timeline up there as well. May 9th is when I would anticipate delivering the SOP to council, and then I'd be presenting that budget and SOP in a council meeting on May 14th. And then we have our 2, I think we actually have these scheduled now, right? May 20th and 21st budget work sessions, the second one if needed, based on y'all's appetite. And then ideally, we'd be set up for the council to contemplate approval of the budget in the first meeting in June.
June 4, yeah. So where would we be looking at enough detail that we could make intelligent decisions as to adjustments that may make sense? Where in this cycle? Where in this cycle is there sufficient detail, and would we have enough data?
Oh, I see. So I guess what I'm suggesting, based on the high-level information.
Well, yeah, I see the high-level
Yeah,
information,
so
but
if
if you
we
go
gotten
down,
this
if you go
about
down
right,
one level, for example.
Right.
I mean, obviously, there's considerable more detailed salaries and so forth and so on.
You're going to have multiple touch points, I guess, what I'm about to say. So
Right, and
right now, you can look at the high-level information. If there's something we're off base here, give us that direction
you know, I
now.
think we
or
asked
earlier is
the
better.
questions now.
And
so
then
we could,
when we get to the budget presentation, obviously, you'll have the opportunity to look at that information and give us any refining data or information then.
that would be
Of course,
in
as
the
the farther
May,
we get down the road, the harder it is to make major changes.
oh, of course. But the
And-
May 9, we will see some significant detail.
Yeah, and then the work sessions, you know, where you have the opportunity to dig into actual line item
Oh.
detail of what's in the budget, and
More than we'll be able to
Yeah.
absorb.
Weigh in a little on what Jack said. I think it'd be helpful to staff and certainly probably useful to us to get you some specific information as soon as we can, rather than sort of, we're all sort of jamming at the end, which is unnecessary. We have a finite budget, about $27 million and so forth. I think I'm speaking, obviously, just as myself, having reviewed this and looked back historically at some items. The proposed tax adjustments are minor, and that we can discuss that, where it's a half a cent or it's up a half a cent or something along those lines. And no secret, my aversion to taxes, generally raising them, but taxes are what we pay for a civilized society, and I'm not opposed to taxes. I just watch them carefully. I think our eyes really need to be focused on the expenditures that are here. We really have to focus on some of these, and some of my colleagues in the past have mentioned spending as issues that we need to look at. So we have to have a realistic eye at some of these potential capital projects. I think by putting some of these dates, years out, you've given us the wiggle room to do that. But I think we owe staff as well as ourselves as much clarity as possible as we plan forward. In the past, I found it very useful. I found some of my old notes from last June where Dana and staff would take recommendations and run them in scenarios. We did this last June when we were discussing our 2024 budget and plan. And it's how I've always worked in the past, and others may have worked in a similar fashion. But it made it useful to me to see whether the things I am thinking about, what is the actual impact on these bottom lines, which you all have often pointed out to, the operating margin and the fund balance availability. There are, to me, among these potential capital items, the lowest hanging fruit there of money that can be saved is the proposed fire ladder truck, which between December and now has increased by 24%. And I don't think you do that intentionally to scare us or anything. I think you've done your research, and I did some of my own. It takes 2 to 3 years. And not only if you order one, does it take that long to get it, but these few people who build fire trucks put in escalator clauses hooked to some consumer price index that you're agreeing to could happen over that 2 years to 3 years of manufacturing process. So to me, that's one of the real potential savings. I do think some of these other items, the public services complex is one that we should really look at is what's the impact if we move it out even a little further? Because we don't have control, as many of you know, of all the variables involved in this situation. It's unlike some other topics where we have control of some of the variables. We own land that we're going to be utilizing for a library, but we don't own land where we can move the public services complex. So it's going to be it will be a heavy lift. Now you have scheduled it out. Thank you. What I'm saying is we probably really look at that and see are we scheduled it out enough, Or is it wiser to stretch it out? Or, that's why I was asking about the possibility of the total potential revenue, or is there something I'm missing here that would make it easier for us? I do think we need to drill down more on the third potential fire facility, because we still need some answers to the data, at least I do, about the numbers of and where fire and emergency services calls come from, and how we stack up among other communities and ourselves as far as being able to deliver that service. When I look back at some of the KPIs that deal with fire services, for the last 4 or 5 years, we have a standard number in there that of 6 minutes and 30 seconds that we track as to whether or not we're making that time in response. And we have a percentage of how often we do that. I think it's a pretty good percentage. But in the last 3 years, no one's ever said, boy, that percentage is a problem. Not one have I ever heard that, or if I got a memo on it or it was in a presentation, I missed it, and I will accept that.
It's the specific reason we did the Birdie in 2019.
Did the what?
The Birdie, the evaluation of how to solve that problem.
What I'm trying to understand is, how do we know it's a problem?
Yeah, I think our fire chief told us that, number one.
And
It's a benchmark that we use on a national standard. Are you saying, since you have not heard it from a constituent,
No.
that is a problem, then therefore it's not a problem? Is that what you're
No,
suggesting?
not at all. I haven't said I hadn't heard it from a constituent. I said myself, I don't know what that benchmark is. Do you know what it is?
I remember the briefing that we
I-
had from the fire chief, and that we did not meet the metric.
I
And so that benchmark that was there is a problem for
I
that.
remember the briefing. I don't recall the metric, and I don't hear a metric now. That's fine. That's one of the things I want to drill down on. What I do recall asking was for the heat map, which could tell us where these calls are coming from. And we know that 4% of them are fires. That means that 96% of them are not. They're emergencies, which is why we got into the discussion of changing it, the title of this, to a third fire facility rather than a fire department.
And can I remind everybody that we put an evaluation at council's direction in FY25, it's a Birdie, to evaluate the best way to, what the best facility and staffing is to meet that need.
Okay,
And that Birdie will involve all this data and much more that you're asking for.
okay. Well, then we're going to actually see the metrics in 2025. Okay, that answers my question. Thanks. Other comments or thoughts from council members? John,
I've got
Jeff?
a couple comments just in general of where you're going with this, Patrick, and trying to make sure I understand. What I'm seeing from this briefing is the staff has put together relatively comprehensive 50,000-foot level on the strategic operating plan based on the information that we provided them in the strategic meeting that we had.
December.
Okay, the retreat that was on there, and various emails and things like that that are from there. And the last slide they presented on here was basically, if you have any changes to the guidance, please provide that to us. We have a process, and it's multiple touch points. I don't remember exactly how many. I think if I counted before, it was like 16 touch points, 15, 16 touch points throughout the year, in which we talk about the budget. This is one of these touch points, okay? And I've got no problem in having all these conversations.
Good.
Okay? But what we need to make sure we're doing as a council is giving clear guidance to the staff.
I agree.
And not being wishy-washy about what it is and say, okay, 1 month we like this, another month we don't like this, and going back and forth. So if we're going to make changes on it, let's have the conversations and make the changes. Give some specific guidance as to what it is. Because that's what we were supposed to do in the strategic retreat.
Well, one, we didn't have a full council at the strategic retreat, but nevertheless, we do have one now, one. And two, what I raised at the beginning of my comments is that we provide some comments to staff so that we're not all jammed at the end of this process. So I think we're in agreement. Your comments, like everybody else's here, are going to be welcome for discussion and for staff feedback.
Okay. I want to make sure we're fulfilling our end of the bargain here, which is to make sure we give them clear guidance.
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think that's been a problem sometimes in the past.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. John Taylor, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I think two things. You know, we talked a lot in a previous slide about various software packages that we're looking to update. This is apropos of the response time and the 6.5 minutes and what have you, and I recall the chief's presentation as well. Somebody has to have a software program that looks at this and might be able to help us understand, were we to locate a third facility, whether it had a red truck in it or what I call an ambulance, an EMS vehicle, how would that change our existing actual response time? Because when we look at the feedback from the resident survey, they're satisfied with the response time now, even though it is above the national benchmark, the national metric that we look at as a benchmark. So I'm guessing, without any subject matter expertise, that someone can help us identify that. That would go a long way in my mind to understanding what's a reasonable expenditure for us to undertake in aggregate, knowing there's going to be a staff component to it as well as an equipment component and presumably a maintenance and keep it clean and what have you. Secondly, with regard to, are there other council priorities we need to address? I would say with respect to FY25, the answer is no. It's a little late to make major changes. What I don't see in this, and I know there was a capital item for this a couple of years ago, which has now disappeared, is parking. And I'm just flagging that as we go into the November, December strategic, looking forward, we probably have to bring that back on here. We hear it from business people, we hear it from residents, we hear it related to different library plans. It's on people's minds, and I think we need to address it, but not in the context of approving the FY25. Other than that, I think the way you've laid it
you want
out.
to add it into the 5-year plan, though?
No, I'm not saying it because we don't have enough information, but I'm thinking that that's going to be a topic that we will revisit in November and December of this year. And it might get added at that time, but there's no need to try to shoehorn it in now or just take something off the shelf from 2 years ago or whenever and just throw that in.
I fully support looking at the parking issues in November, December timeframe. We took the
In my
strategic
4
plan.
years on council, if I last that long, that we do something in that regard, but I don't think we're going to do it next year, so.
Can I follow up on that? One thing that would be really helpful, I think, is for us to get feedback from the listening sessions that are the quarterly listening.
Business listening session?
Yes.
Yeah.
With the business community, if we could get some feedback from that. And because I think parking is going to be part of that conversation at some point in time. Or just let us know what transpires during those meetings.
I mean, so is there anything that you think would inform this budget development?
Other thoughts or comments? So from an action standpoint, we all, as individuals, need to do some homework, and if we have some questions or suggestions, we should feed them to Jeff and Dana. Is that fair? And there was a few things folks asked for. You'll just follow up with those minor items. But, and I guess the last thing is we can, perhaps after you, if we all move as quickly as possible to get some information to you, you can develop an alternative possible. What does the alternative universe or scenarios look like before we start asking? I'll refrain from asking until after you've sort of done some pencil sharpening based on what you hear from or receive from the council members themselves.
We did a fair amount of that with regard to tax rates.
I appreciate that.
We haven't done it with like adding or removing capital items and things like that.
I saw that clearly, but because the only thing, I said this before, the only thing that this council has as a mechanism into the pocketbooks of our residents is setting this property tax rate every year. We don't set the sales tax rate or the personal income tax rate. We found out we're not setting the water rates. We found out that insurance rates, auto insurance, health insurance rate. These are set by sort of other governing bodies, and they fall on all our taxpayers, all of us sitting here and all of those folks who are our neighbors. And so I think we owe it to them to watch out for the one thing we do have a say over. And I think we did a good job last year, and I think what you've laid out is something that should be worked with. Other comments, questions, thoughts? Go ahead,
Dave.
Dr. Morgan.
Appreciate the efforts on this.
Looks good for this, where we are in the process, so this is right level of detail.
It's a good early start, really is. It's not June. It's just the beginning of April, so to speak. Okay. We have, thank you both, Dana, Jeff, and everybody else who worked on this. Other business. I will ask my colleagues for other business topics they want to raise or discuss. I'll start with Dr. Morgan, because I just don't want to forget you again. Go ahead.
Thank you. None at this time.
Okay. John Taylor, nothing?
Not at this time.
Barbara, no. Jack Farrell?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, I am also good. So we now have comments for attendees. I'll ask the village clerk, is there any? There are none. No one has filed to speak up. I will ask, even before I saw the hand, I will ask if there's anyone who has not signed up but would like to speak. Please come forward. I see two hands. Okay, all righty, please come forward. Lynn, you were here first tonight, so you get to speak first.
I just had a couple things I thought I'd inquire of. One, when we were talking about getting a new fire truck for $2.1 million, I went online and found several sites where you can buy used fire trucks and EMS trucks, and they seem to range around $200,000 to $500,000.
This truck is a ladder truck. You got to ask the question correctly. It's very different from just your average fire truck.
Okay.
Just
But
so you know.
They could still be resources to look at, especially right now with a lot of the urban decay and people fleeing those cities. They may find themselves cutting back on their fire department needs. So it could just be something to look at.
Thank you.
The other thing I was wondering about with the library, you know, it's awfully nice to have the library right downtown as part of the town community. I got a hunch if you build a new one, it's not going to be downtown. And it made me wonder about the possibility, and maybe you guys have talked about this already, of combining library resources across the county where we can, wherever you live and you have your library card, you can use any of the libraries in the county, and perhaps even working in the future to create it where each one has like a specialty. So you don't have to buy a whole lot of books about golf and sports history at every single library. It could be in Pinehurst, and European history over in Southern Pines, and children's books down in Aberdeen or something like that, and then have also probably a vehicle at each of the towns that would make deliveries to the other libraries. Like you could go there directly, but you could also just order it, and they would bring it from Southern Pines to Pinehurst, and you would then have maybe one extra employee and a car rather than 4 additional employees forever. It just seems like a way that would benefit the entire county. Everyone would be able to benefit instead of Pinehurst having a great library and everyone else having, you know.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, it just seemed like a way to save $8 million.
Well, thank you.
And benefit every town in the county.
Right.
And so, thank you. That was it.
Thank you for coming forward. The other hand. Yes.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. Debbie Layler, 80 Azalea Road. With respect to this evening's meeting, The new sand sidewalks are terrific. The Public Works Department has finally got a very granular mix that is not quite as slippery as the original clay ones, which I think are the ones that really are causing the erosion problems and also have liability issues with slippage because they're very dangerous. And to say that residents like them would be not so much. A lot of homeowners really hate the ones that were originally put in, as I'm sure you know. And so it's really a nod to the National Park Service. Let's make no bones about it, which was how you originally presented it. Also, budgeting for software. Councilman Taylor, thank you for raising the issue of short-term rental monitoring software programs, because we spent a lot of money. You talked a lot tonight about budgeting for employees. I assume our planning staff are very well paid. They're very well educated. They were not hired to monitor rental sites, and nor are their efforts the timeliest and most efficacious ways of addressing the identification of illegal short-term rentals or any enforcement actions, which under the current system can take months. It's not fair to residents, and it's not fair to the planning staff. Thank you for raising it. I hope you will consider adding it into the budget, even though you said both tonight it's late in the planning process to add something new, but yet we're early in the budgeting process, so we still have time to do it. I would ask that the council follow up with staff to identify what the parameters are that they're looking for in these software programs and stay on top of it, because it appears that there is evolving technology which is out there. So what exactly is the village looking for in these programs? That I just would ask you to please ask those questions, because I think it's unfair to the residents to continue under the current system. Those were not my original comments. My original comments for tonight referred to the last council meeting when you were discussing the temporary amendment for social districts and whether or not the hours of operation, noon till 11 p.m., were in conflict with the village noise ordinance. It is. The noise ordinance is 10 o'clock every night of the week. 2 comments were made in support of shutting down or modifying the special district hours till 10 o'clock. The first was that there's no correlation between people walking around drinking and noise adequate to violate the noise ordinance. The second one was that the social district does not encompass much of what I would really truly consider a neighborhood. So with respect to the first response, the ordinance for the special districts makes no mention of allowed outdoor music. Dollars to Donuts, Bellagio, Drum and Quill, Lacey's will all be playing music. And are you going to make them close down at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock? There's no sense to have a noise ordinance in place if you're going to just ignore it. So either you need to amend the temporary ordinance that you passed to say that the noise ordinance will be suspended for this particular week. Outdoor music will be allowed until 11 o'clock, all 7 nights that the temporary ordinance is in effect, or not. It wasn't just about drunk people walking around, although it does beg the question or raise the question about disturbance of the peace, which is something completely different from a noise ordinance. But okay, with respect to the second thing about that it does not encompass any neighborhoods, and so not many people will be affected. The village manager responded appropriately, well, there are a lot of houses that actually abut the social district, which is true. There are 37, give or take, and there are 2 apartment buildings, and at least 10 tenants who live above the commercial buildings on Market Square. There are people who will be affected by this. I know it's not going to change what's going to happen during the week of the open, but I really would ask you to all be mindful of all the residents of the village, not just those who live away. People who live close to the commercial district have a very special relationship with that district, and it's your responsibility to protect them as well as the people who live in Pine Wild or out by Lake Pinehurst. Actually, thinking about that situation where the comment was, well, there are not that many people really going to be affected, it reminded me unhappily of the past 10 years where homeowners would come one at a time to complain about short-term rentals next door. And they tried contacting all the village departments and got no response. And kind of the attitude was, there are not that many of them. We don't really need to pay attention. And all of a sudden, we had 500 of them. It is the attitude of not paying attention to the individual or the smaller groups. That's a slippery, slidey slope you all need to be really careful of if you want to protect our quaint New England village. And I was unhappily reminded of that when I heard that comment last week. The people who live close to the original historic downtown area are no less important than the ones who live in CCNC or wherever else in the village. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I have a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's regather in 5 minutes, if that's okay, or does anyone want to double that to 10? We have 3 significant topics to discuss, so I'm going once with 5.